Have you ever felt a chill running down your spine as if someone or something is watching you? Let me take you into a tale that might just make you look over your shoulder. Our story begins on an ordinary day, the kind that blends into the rest of the week, lost in the monotony of routine. The protagonist, a woman of unflinching spirit and an unwavering smile, woke up to the chirping of birds and a sky painted in hues of orange and pink. As the day unfolded, so did a series of peculiar occurrences. She noticed it first in the morning. A chair in the living room slightly moved from its usual place. She shrugged it off, attributing it to her forgetfulness. But then it was the little things: a book misplaced, the radio mysteriously turning on, and the faint but distinct smell of a perfume she didn't own. As the day wore on, these trivial anomalies started forming a pattern. It was as if her home, her sanctuary, was slowly transforming into a playground for an unseen entity. A creeping sensation began to settle in, the eerie feeling of being watched, of being observed from a distance by eyes she couldn't see. She tried to shake off the feeling. Perhaps she was just overthinking, she told herself. Maybe it was the stress of work or the loneliness of living alone. But the unease lingered, like a shadow that wouldn't leave her side. The sun dipped below the horizon and the world outside her windows turned into an inky black canvas. As the day turned into night, she felt a growing unease, a sense of dread she couldn't shake off. The normalcy of her day had taken a dark turn, and she was left wondering, pondering, and most importantly, fearing the unknown. The fear wasn't about what was happening, but what was yet to come. As the day turned into night, she felt a growing unease, a sense of dread she couldn't shake off. A chill ran down her spine, and she found herself wishing for the break of dawn. But the night was young, and the real fear had just begun. When darkness fell, so did the silence, the kind of silence that screams. The night was thick and the air heavy, as if holding its breath. Our protagonist, a woman of courage yet not immune to fear, began to experience the inexplicable. The house creaked and groaned as if it were alive, speaking a language of dread that only she could understand. Shadows danced on the walls, taking on forms that should not exist in the realm of reality. They twisted and turned, morphing into grotesque silhouettes that seemed to watch her every move. Strange noises seeped into the stillness of the night, filling the empty spaces with a symphony of the uncanny. A soft whisper here, a distant knock there, an unnerving rustle somewhere in the darkness. They were sounds that had no source, no reason to be, but were there nonetheless. She felt a presence, an unseen watcher in the shadows. It was always there, lurking at the edges of her vision, a persistent feeling of being observed. It was as if unseen eyes were tracing her every move, studying her, noting her fears. She tried to rationalize the events, to find logical explanations for the illogical. Perhaps the house was settling or the wind was playing tricks. Maybe it was all in her mind, a product of her overactive imagination. But deep down she knew. She was scared, scared of the unknown, scared of the darkness, scared of the silence that screamed. She felt a chill run down her spine, a cold touch of dread that made her heart race. The house was not just a house anymore. It had become a playground for the unseen, a stage for the uncanny, a vessel for the haunting. As she lay in bed, the silence was shattered by a sound that froze her blood. Footsteps, slow and measured, echoing through the hallways of the house. She held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right outside her door. In the dead of the night, she heard footsteps, but she lived alone. Have you ever heard footsteps in an empty house? The echo can chill your bones. The protagonist finds herself in such a situation, her heart pounding in her chest like a wild drum. She could hear the rhythmic tapping of footsteps, growing louder with each passing second. It was as though an invisible entity was pacing around her home, leaving its spectral footprints wherever it tread. Our protagonist, fueled by both fear and curiosity, decides to seek out the source of these chilling sounds. She ventures into the labyrinth of her home, each creak of the floorboards echoing the ominous footsteps. She checks every room, every closet, every nook and cranny, but her search yields nothing. The footsteps continue, a haunting symphony playing on a loop, but their source remains unseen. Her heart rate quickens, her palms become clammy. It's as if the house itself is playing a cruel game with her, the footsteps its eerie soundtrack. She clings to her last shred of courage, determined to confront whatever is causing this disturbance. In her desperation, she reaches for her phone, her lifeline to the outside world. But as she attempts to dial for help, she realizes her phone is as lifeless as the silence that follows each footstep. The screen remains stubbornly dark, refusing to respond to her desperate pleas for help. She tries again and again, her fingers trembling, but the device remains unresponsive. It's as if the unseen presence had drained the life out of it, leaving her utterly isolated. The realization sends a cold shiver down her spine, amplifying her fear. The footsteps continue, their rhythm becoming more insistent, more ominous. They echo through the silent house, a chilling reminder of the unseen presence. The protagonist can feel it, a palpable dread that fills each room, each corner of her home. Alone and terrified, she felt an unseen presence closing in on her. The footsteps, the dead phone, the chilling silence, they all pointed towards an undeniable truth. Something was in the house with her. Something unseen, yet so terrifyingly real. Sometimes the things we can't see are the most terrifying. As our protagonist delves deeper into the mystery of her home, she stumbles upon a chilling truth that sends shivers down her spine. It's a discovery that transforms the familiar walls of her house into a chilling mausoleum of secrets. She learns that her quaint little home, her sanctuary, was once the stage of a tragedy that would make even the bravest person's blood run cold. A tragedy so profound, it left an indelible mark, not just on the bricks and mortar, but on the very air that fills each room. Years ago, long before she moved in, her home was the residence of a family much like her own, a loving couple with 2 children, living their lives in peace and tranquility. But the tranquility was shattered one fateful night when an unspeakable event occurred. A tragedy so sudden, so devastating, it tore the family apart, leaving the house in a state of sorrow and despair. The mother, who was known for her kind heart and gentle soul, was found lifeless under mysterious circumstances. The investigators were left baffled, unable to determine the cause of her untimely demise. The case was closed, unsolved, and soon forgotten by the town. But it seems the house never forgot. It held on to the sorrow, the despair, and the unresolved mystery. The strange occurrences that our protagonist experienced were not mere coincidences. They were echoes of a past that refused to be forgotten, of a life that was abruptly and inexplicably cut short. The unseen presence was not a figment of her imagination, but a lingering spirit, rooted in the past, reaching out for acknowledgement, for closure. As the horrifying truth sinks in, the protagonist is left with a terrifying realization. The strange occurrences, the unseen presence, the inexplicable fear, they were all real. She wasn't alone in the house, and the unseen presence wasn't a living person. In the face of fear, we discover our true strength. These are words our protagonist found herself leaning on, a beacon of hope in the engulfing darkness. She had been living a nightmare, a chilling encounter with an unseen presence that seemed to have taken a disturbing interest in her life. Yet this brave soul decided to confront her spectral tormentor. The air was thick with anticipation as she stepped into the room where most of the strange occurrences had unfolded. It was as if the very walls were holding their breath, awaiting her next move. She spoke, her voice echoing in the silence. "I acknowledge you. I know you exist." The words hung heavy in the room, a tangible admission of the unseen. She continued, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her belly. "I don't know why you're here or what you want, but this is my home. I want to live in peace." This was her stand, her declaration. A plea and a demand rolled into one. Then something miraculous happened. The strange occurrences, the eerie noises, the moving objects, everything stopped. The house fell into a silence more profound than she had ever experienced. It was as if a great weight had been lifted, a sigh of relief that filled every corner of the house. The unseen presence was no longer felt. Our protagonist was left in a state of relief, yet forever changed. She had faced an unimaginable horror, a haunting that would have driven most to the brink of sanity. But she had stood her, confronted the unseen, and emerged on the other side. This experience had altered her, reshaped her understanding of the world and her place within it. She had discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed, a resilience that would now define her. She had faced her fear, survived a haunting, and lived to tell the tale. But as she settled into her bed, The faint echo of footsteps returned. Was it really over?